In the dim light of the hospital room, Oliver slowly blinked his eyes open, a weight lifting as he emerged from a long, deep slumber. The world around him seemed both familiar and oddly distant, like a dream fading in the morning sun. He tried to make sense of the machines that beeped beside him, the sterile scent of the room, and the concerned faces of family he could barely recognize. Recognition dawned on him. He attempted to speak, but his voice faltered, his throat dry and scratchy. A nurse promptly offered him water, its coolness soothing him. "Take it slow," a doctor gently said. "You've been unconscious for quite some time." But there was no time to slow down. Didn't they understand? Oliver knew he had to warn them before it was too late. Gathering all his strength, and with a voice that carried the weight of unseen worlds, he murmured, "By next year." He paused, taking a moment to catch his breath. The urgency in his tone was unmistakable. Then, in a statement that silenced everyone, he declared, "The entire country must evacuate." Oliver's revelation about what would happen in the UK in 2025 could easily be brushed off as the delirious ramblings of a man emerging from a 10-year coma. After all, he had been away for so long after that one horrible day. But there was something about his predictions that made people take his words very, very seriously. It was exactly 10 years ago when Oliver had been in that harrowing accident. A stormy night, roads slick with rain, and an unfortunate twist of fate had combined to alter the course of his life forever. Everyone had mourned the vibrant young man who was full of dreams and aspirations, thinking they had lost him forever. But against all odds, Oliver woke up, and with his return came a message so unsettling that even the most skeptical couldn't ignore. Because what he claimed would be the UK's downfall had already begun unfolding across the country. The first signs of trouble were already popping up. And the strangest part? Oliver shouldn't have known any of this, having been in a coma the entire time. So how did he? Whatever terrifying future he had witnessed, people were convinced they didn't want to be a part of it. Many citizens began trying to leave the country. They were desperate to escape the grim fate Oliver described. The most astonishing aspect was that for a long while, Oliver's family had little hope of him waking up. Oliver had been in a coma for nearly a decade, and the doctors had grown less optimistic. They couldn't provide his parents and brother Liam with any concrete answers about if or when he might regain consciousness. Despite this, Oliver's parents and Liam never gave up on him. They visited the hospital daily, speaking to the seemingly unresponsive figure in the bed. They'd talk to Oliver, hoping he could hear them and eventually awaken. However, when he finally did, they expected their reunion to be a lot more joyful. Every so often, friends and relatives would gently ask, "How long will you keep this up?" But Liam and his parents were clear. As long as Oliver's heart still beat, they'd never leave his side. For a decade, they watched over him together in the plain hospital room. Seeing Oliver, once so full of life, now in a coma, was deeply sad. A haunting memory from 10 years ago, a dreaded phone call detailing a gruesome accident, always lurked in the shadows, a stark reminder of how swiftly life can change. No matter how tough it got, they never gave up hope, and the hospital staff was heartened to see how loved Oliver was. In the quiet halls of the hospital, everyone spoke of Oliver's devoted family. They believed that even in his coma, Oliver could sense their love and the comforting words they whispered. Day after day, they reassured him, hoping their voices reached his heart. The entire situation was particularly hard for Liam. He used to be the younger, playful brother, but now their roles seemed flipped. Oliver's life had essentially been put on pause, while Liam continued to live his life over the past 10 years. And during every significant moment, his thoughts would drift to Oliver. On this particular day, Liam sat beside Oliver's bed, sharing one of those moments. Within the muted hues of the hospital room, Liam leaned closer to Oliver, sharing whispers of recent heart-to-hearts with his girlfriend Lisa. They had just moved in together and were discussing the next steps in their relationship. Lisa had always wanted to become a mother and felt ready to embark on the journey of raising children with Liam. His heart swelled as he began unveiling this chapter of his life to Oliver. "You'll be an uncle," he murmured, a grin lighting up his face. But just as the words left his lips, a fleeting shadow across Oliver's face stopped him cold. Was that a twitch? An involuntary muscle spasm? It couldn't be. For a decade, Oliver hadn't so much as stirred. Liam blinked, grappling with disbelief, his heart racing as hope and doubt waged war within him. In the hushed room, as Liam bared his soul, he caught a faint shadow of movement. He told himself it was a figment of emotion, perhaps a trick of his teary eyes. But when he plunged back into his story, there it was again, that faint stir. He blinked rapidly, clearing the mist from his eyes, trying to trust his own senses. And then, as the haze lifted, a whisper of hope tickled his mind, a hope he had suppressed for a decade. Liam's heart raced, disbelief flooding his every thought. Was this really happening? Panic and hope tangled within him, leaving him paralyzed for a moment. Should he call out to his parents, who were just across the room, unaware of this miracle unfolding? Or should he maybe get a nurse? And above all, he feared startling Oliver. Would speaking too loudly or acting too hastily disrupt this fragile moment of reawakening? When Liam realized that this was the moment everyone had been waiting for, Oliver was finally waking up. He gently rose from his chair and quietly called his parents over. "Mom, Dad, come quick," he whispered. As soon as his parents grasped the situation, they rushed to the bedside. "Can you hear us? Wake up!" they urged him. Liam quickly informed a nurse about the situation, and she hurried to the room to check on Oliver, hopeful that he was truly awakening. But nothing happened. The weight of Liam's disappointment was palpable, almost tangible in the silent room. Every part of him had pulsed with anticipation, believing, hoping that his brother was finally stirring from his prolonged slumber. But the silence, stretching out like an endless void, suggested it might have been a cruel illusion. With a heavy sigh, Liam sank into the chair next to the bed, his heart heavy. He mumbled an apology to his parents, regret evident in his voice for unintentionally giving them false hope. But then, Liam's gaze fixed intently on Oliver's face, noticing a subtle twitch of his eyelids. The delicate flutter of his lashes hinted at some underlying movement. Something was about to happen. Fortunately, the nurse hadn't yet left the room and caught the motion too. With urgency in her voice, she called for assistance, and in mere moments, the room buzzed with the presence of nurses and doctors. In an instant, the room became a hive of movement. Medical professionals dashed in synchronized chaos, machines voiced their alerts, and nurses gave clear, swift orders. It was a cacophony of hope and urgency. In the midst of it all, Liam was an island of stillness, his gaze unwavering from Oliver, tears glistening, waiting for that one sign of life. Suddenly, as if answering a silent prayer, Oliver's eyes gently parted. Time seemed to halt for Liam, his heart suspended in a mix of joy and disbelief. 10 years, and now, those familiar eyes looked back at him. The wave of emotions was too strong. Liam and his parents were consumed in a flood of tears. Within minutes, the doctors and nurses confirmed that Oliver was stable. They gently suggested giving him some much-needed rest after the miraculous awakening. Even though Oliver was clearly groggy and straining to keep his eyes open, he managed to do so. And when he finally recognized his brother and parents, a faint smile graced his lips. Everyone drew close, embracing him gently. They just looked into his eyes, words unnecessary in that profound moment. The family, while basking in the miracle of his awakening, treaded softly around him, their voices mere whispers. They gave him the tranquility he so desperately needed. Yet beneath the surface of their joy, there was an unspoken worry. While he had awoken, they still didn't know the state of his mind or what challenges lay ahead. Amidst the joy, doubt began to creep in. Their hearts said he knew them. That tender smile upon recognizing their faces was undeniable. Yet, the practicalities weighed on their minds. Could he talk again, or walk? Would the basics have to be relearned, step by painstaking step? The path before them shimmered with hope, but it was interlaced with shadows of uncertainty. To their relief, Oliver showed promising signs. After a few tense minutes, he managed to push a few words past his lips. It wasn't much, but the weight of what he uttered struck deep. Hearing what he said, they were taken aback and, truthfully, a bit alarmed. Perhaps the accident and the prolonged coma had taken more of a toll on him than they had feared. "By next year," Oliver murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The family instinctively leaned in, straining to catch every fragile word. Liam felt a surge of emotion threatening to spill from his eyes. The sound of his brother's voice, after so long, was both haunting and comforting. Yet, the comfort was short-lived. As Oliver continued, a chilling urgency tinged his weak voice, sending shivers down Liam's spine. With a haunting clarity, he whispered, "The entire country must evacuate." After delivering that ominous message, Oliver's strength seemed to wane rapidly. It was as if he had mustered every ounce of his energy to convey this critical warning, and now his body couldn't sustain any longer. The weight of exhaustion pressed his eyelids down, and just like that, he slipped away again. A heavy realization hung in the room. For Oliver to speak so soon after a decade-long coma was nothing short of miraculous. Liam and his parents exchanged glances before turning their gaze to the doctor. Without uttering a word, the same troubling thought echoed in their minds. Why had Oliver used his fleeting moment of consciousness to share such a dire warning? What looming threat were they facing? In the suffocating hush that enveloped the room, time seemed to stand still. Everyone remained rooted in place, as if anchored by the weight of Oliver's words. The muffled bustle of the hospital beyond their closed door hinted at a world moving on, but in that room, doubt and disbelief held them captive. The doctor cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Look," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Patients, after emerging from a coma, can sometimes grapple with distinguishing reality from dreams." Liam exchanged a glance with his parents, who clung to the doctor's words, perhaps searching for a semblance of reassurance. "It's essential," the doctor continued, "to give them time and not jump to conclusions based on their initial statements." Liam's jaw tightened. Deep down, an instinct told him that Oliver wasn't merely confused. Their bond, fortified over the years, assured him that Oliver's words carried weight. He couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something, somewhere, was amiss. So he waited. Liam remained steadfast, a sentinel beside Oliver's bed. Days melded into nights as he kept his unwavering vigil, hoping against hope to hear Oliver speak once more. It seemed as though Oliver had expended every ounce of his energy on that cryptic message, leaving him drained and silent. But after what felt like an eternity, Oliver's voice, weak yet discernible, pierced the silence. Oliver began recounting his experiences from the seemingly endless coma. His words evoked not mere darkness, but a haunting journey through familiar but unfamiliar places. It was as if he had been traveling to other dimensions, now finally returned. Liam and his parents exchanged shocked glances, chills running down their spines. Listening intently, Liam tried to understand how Oliver could have had such experiences while lying in a hospital bed. The room grew silent as they all absorbed the weight of Oliver's strange story. The concern and disbelief were evident on the faces of their parents, and Liam knew exactly what they were thinking. But Oliver wasn't finished with his story. He took a deep breath, and with a hint of sadness in his eyes, he explained that he had wanted to return to his body much sooner, but was held back by forces beyond his comprehension. He had visited the future, and what he saw there was alarming. "There's a disturbing message that needs to be shared with everyone," he said, his eyes heavy. Liam and his parents furrowed their brows in confusion and concern. They didn't know what to believe. The room suddenly grew colder. Oliver's words weighed heavily in the air. Thankfully, the nurses and doctors were nearby, ready to offer advice. They explained that many people who woke from a coma reported seeing intense, vivid visions, recounting experiences that felt deeply real. There was no logical explanation for it, but the most likely theory was that these visions were merely hallucinations. However, as soon as Oliver heard this, his reaction was swift and fierce. His eyes blazed with a mix of frustration and desperation. The suggestion that his experiences were just made up hurt him a lot. "I came back to share something vital," he insisted, his voice quivering with urgency. "I need you all to truly listen to me. It's not just about me, it's about all of us. This is a matter of life and death." Eventually, his parents and brother relented and sat down to hear what he had to say. Oliver was still weak, but he had gathered enough strength to speak to them. Words just flowed from him, feeling like he didn't even have to think about what he was saying. Once he had shared everything, he looked to his parents and brother. They stared back with wide, disbelieving eyes, speechless. A quiet moment passed before anyone spoke. Finally, it was Liam who broke the silence. "All right, I believe you," Liam said to his brother. As those words left his lips, a softness returned to Oliver's eyes, and he let out a sigh of relief. Liam held his brother's hand, looking deep into his eyes, and offered a reassuring smile. He wouldn't let Oliver know that he had lied to him, because Liam didn't truly believe what Oliver had shared. However, he was convinced that Oliver believed it wholeheartedly. He just wanted to be there for his brother, so he chose not to complicate things further. Liam saw that Oliver had a lot of healing to do. Given how much it meant to Oliver, Liam chose to go along with what he said. However, he wasn't prepared for what came next. Oliver made a shocking statement. By 2025, everyone should leave the UK. He didn't explain why. It seemed he wanted to tell the media, but Liam didn't want his brother talking to them. Though Liam told Oliver he believed him, he knew that few outside their family would share the same sentiment. Outside the walls of the hospital, people would likely laugh at his brother, a risk Liam wasn't willing to take. He loved Oliver too much. So Liam and his parents promised to support Oliver and spread his message, but only once he had fully recovered. If he truly intended to save the UK, he would need to be in better shape. Seeing no other option, Oliver agreed. Time was of the essence, with 2025 just a few months away. The UK had only less than a year to evacuate, A daunting task for a country of over 67 million. Oliver believed the sooner people knew, the better. Unknown to Liam and the rest of his family, Oliver began secretly contacting the media just a week after waking from his coma. Physically, he wasn't at his best, but mentally, he felt up to the task. Oliver tried to arrange an interview or some sort of platform to share his message. He spoke of his coma and how he had visited the future during that time, carrying with him a crucial warning for the UK. He naturally reached out to major media outlets first, but their reactions were unsurprising. None took him seriously. Some cut him off before he could even finish his story, while others laughed off his claims, thanking him for the unexpected chuckle to start their day. Oliver felt hurt when no one took him seriously. He just wanted to warn people about a coming disaster. But instead of giving up, he became even more determined to share his story. For 2 weeks, his family had no idea about his efforts. They assumed he was honoring his promise to wait. That was until one day a reporter showed up at the hospital. Oliver hadn't exactly met top-tier journalists, but with limited options, he needed to take what he could get for a chance to be heard. Ideally, Oliver wanted to take his revelation straight to the Prime Minister, but he knew this was a journey. He hoped this reporter was a step in the right direction. However, his family didn't share his optimism. When they spoke with the reporter and learned he worked for a sensationalist news site, mostly dealing in clickbait and false stories, they didn't want him discussing or reporting on Oliver. They feared he would just mock Oliver in the article and make a laughingstock of him. However, the reporter dismissed the family's concerns. He was on a mission, and Oliver was eager to share his outlandish tale. The reporter would be foolish not to write about it, knowing it could potentially bring in a significant number of clicks. The family felt helpless to stop it. Oliver had clearly gone behind their backs. Liam made one final attempt to reason with his brother, pleading with him not to speak to the reporter. But Oliver wouldn't listen, and Liam was asked to give them some space. Reluctantly, he complied. Outside Oliver's hospital room, the family anxiously waited. They couldn't hear the conversation, but they could observe them through the window. Oliver was speaking with fervor, and, at first, the reporter jotted everything down with an amused grin. But then, something shifted. Suddenly, the reporter's expression shifted. He stopped writing, but Oliver continued speaking. The reporter stared at him in disbelief for several minutes, until even Oliver paused to ask what was wrong. He looked utterly taken aback. But why? What had Oliver revealed? Out of nowhere, the reporter abruptly stood up from his chair and walked straight out of the room without uttering a word to Oliver. As he opened the door, Liam heard Oliver calling out to him, asking where he was going. But the reporter didn't respond to Oliver any further. Liam and his parents stood rooted to the spot. They were stunned to see the reporter looking as pale as a ghost. "What on earth did Oliver tell you to get this reaction?" Liam repeatedly asked. But the only reply he received was, "He's right." Liam glanced at his parents and saw confusion in their eyes. They had many questions, but it was clear they wouldn't get answers from this reporter. "I'm sorry, but I need to call my wife immediately," he said, his voice shaky. As he left, Liam and his parents strained to eavesdrop, hoping to glean some understanding. They caught only snippets of the conversation, but one sentence made their blood run cold. "We need to leave the country immediately," the reporter whispered into the phone. Liam exchanged looks with his parents. Had they not taken the matter seriously enough? Clearly, they weren't alone in their initial skepticism, as the reporter had undoubtedly come with the conviction that Oliver's tale was far-fetched. Yet something had changed his mind. But what had happened? Liam deduced that whatever compelled an evacuation of the UK in 2025, a detail Oliver remained tight-lipped about, must be gravely serious. Why else would this reporter suddenly believe Oliver's outlandish story? Liam stepped into the room. Seeing his brother Oliver looking downcast, he gave him a reassuring hug. Even though he wasn't happy about Oliver sneaking around with the media, right now, all he felt was concern. Oliver just wanted to alert people, and Liam admired that. "I want to help," Liam said. "But you have to tell me, what did you see about 2025 and the UK? I need to know, to truly help." Oliver hesitated. He didn't want to burden his family with what he knew, but he felt cornered. He needed support, and so far, Liam was the only one truly standing by him. Perhaps it was time to share the truth. He took a deep breath and said, "While I was in a coma, I was transported to the future. But it wasn't the UK I know and love. It was ravaged by wildfires so fierce that no one could contain them. The sight was haunting." As Oliver spoke, Liam's eyes widened in horror. The pieces clicked together. Last summer's wildfires had been bad, and they were predicted to be even worse next year. But there was something else that shocked Liam even more. When Oliver had fallen into his coma 10 years ago, massive wildfires in the UK were almost unheard of. Now, they were a common threat. Liam imagined the fiery devastation Oliver described and finally understood the reporter's reaction. Liam felt a knot in his stomach. Every time he tried dismissing Oliver's visions, a nagging thought haunted him. What if they're real? Could he stand by and risk his family's safety if the UK was doomed by 2025? They were in a whirlwind of discussions on how best to share Oliver's warning. But before they could decide, fate intervened. The reporter Oliver had confided in shared the story, but not on his usual tongue-in-cheek platform. The story unexpectedly landed on a doomsday prepper's website. Liam assumed it would be brushed off there, but he couldn't have been more wrong. Many in the UK began to wonder if Oliver's visions might just be genuine and worth preparing for. Shockingly, a wave of people started making plans to leave the UK before the summer of 2025. No one wanted to risk getting caught in a blazing inferno, and Liam couldn't blame them. Oliver had told a captivating tale. Oliver felt it was a step in the right direction, but far from adequate. His message had reached only about 0.1% of the UK's population. That wasn't nearly enough. He aimed to approach the major news channels again, bolstered now by a bit of credibility. He felt an urgency to save everyone. However, before he could make another attempt, he was approached by a figure from national security. This individual had apparently seen the story and wanted to discuss it with Oliver. Initially, Oliver was thrilled, but the message the man conveyed left him deeply shaken. A wave of exhaustion washed over Oliver as the gravity of the agent's words weighed on him. Imprisonment. The thought made him shudder. To be trapped behind cold, sterile walls, wasting away while the inferno raged outside. It was a fate worse than death. He sank back into the pillows, the starch hospital sheets suddenly feeling like shackles. His family gathered close, their concerned faces blurred by his tears. "Don't worry, we'll figure this out," Liam said, though his voice quivered with doubt. Oliver wished he could believe it was that simple, but he could almost feel the flames licking at his skin already. Time was not on their side. As he finally drifted off into a fretful sleep, the visions returned. The acrid smell of smoke stung his nose. Ash rained down from blood-red skies. Entire cities lay in smoldering ruins, and the screams, the haunting echoes of millions crying out, pierced his very soul. Oliver jerked awake, his heart pounding. He couldn't get the images out of his head, nor could he escape the agent's threats, which closed in on him like the encroaching fires he foretold. Come morning, a bit of light returned to Oliver's eyes. The long night had renewed his spirit and resolve. He would keep fighting, no matter the cost. Staying silent was not an option, not when millions of innocent lives hung in the balance. So despite the risks, Oliver vowed to push on, to spread the warning far and wide until it was impossible to ignore, until everyone opened their eyes to the inferno on the horizon. He refused to watch idly as his vision became reality. As long as he still drew breath, hope remained. The path ahead was daunting, but he would walk it nonetheless, step by determined step. And maybe, just maybe, he could wake people from their slumber before it was too late, before the flames consumed everything they held dear. Oliver clung to that desperate hope as fiercely as he did to life itself. It would have to sustain him through the trials to come, trials that would test his conviction, his spirit, his very sense of purpose. But giving up was not an option. Too many lives depended on his voice being heard. He would push through the darkness, guide others to safety, or die trying. Come what may, Oliver would keep fighting, for them, for us all.